This is the Mox Team Zirconia podcast, episode 17, Beat Down with Rishkar and Friends. Welcome to Mox Team Zirconia. I'm Colin.
And I'm Daniel.
And I'm Graham, and we are your hosts. We are a podcast about Magic the Gathering for everyone.
We hope that this podcast is helpful to everyone who is playing Magic at tournaments, from Friday Night Magic to Grand Prix.
That's right. We want to inspire you to try out your own brews, or to maybe pick up an untested deck, like maybe one of ours, for example. Try it out, and then change it to suit your needs. And remember, our immediate goal is always, and will always be, to make the next deck better than the last one.
We don't claim to be perfect at this. We are definitely still learning how to make good decks. We want to bring you with us as we get better and better, and hopefully you will too.
Reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at MoxZirconia and let us know what you think of the podcast.
We'd love to know what you think, especially if you think we're wonderful.
Don't forget, we need your help to spread the word about this podcast, so please tell your Magic playing and home brewing friends about it, and also, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review for us if you can.
In addition, all our episodes are up on YouTube, so subscribe there because we have big plans for more videos in the future. You can search for Mox Zirconia to find them.
Great. So last week on the podcast, we tuned our Bring to Light deck, which we built earlier, and I'll put links to that into the show notes for everybody on our tappedout account, which, incidentally, you can also use to follow along with our discussion, because we'll be putting all the cards we talk about on the podcast today into the maybeboard on tappedout, so make sure you check that out. But anyway, Graham, can you give us a quick rundown of sort of the changes we made and the thinking we went through last week when we changed our Bring to Light deck?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were quite a few cuts that we made from our original deck to our new version, and there was some good reasoning behind that. We cut some dorks out that we didn't need. The Deathcap Cultivators, we didn't really need them for the ramp or for the mana fixing. They only offered 2 colors anyway, so they got cut out. We never ended up using the Epitaph Golem, even though it could have been like a fun toy maybe to use, so that guy got cut out. We cut out Gideon because we can't fetch him with the Bring to Light. We cut out Tameo for the same reason. And basically, we also cut out Confiscation Coup just because we decided we never really needed it. Also, making sure we had the correct number of energy was a little bit rough. Basically, the biggest issue that we had last time with this deck was we struggled picking something to target with the Bring to Light. It's like, cool, we got our Bring to Light. What do we want? Well, not really anything in the deck. That was our biggest struggle with the first build of this deck. So we made some changes. We added some Gear Hulks. We added Cataclysmic Gear Hulk. We added some more Virtuous Gear Hulks. We added some new sorceries. We went with Yehenni's Expertise. We added Barrel's Expertise. Those are both new sorceries from the Aether Revolt. We added in a couple Metallurgic Summonings just to see how that would interact with the Bring to Light mechanic as well as all of our removal stuff. And we added some Skyrider Elves permanently to the list. Those are most of the changes we made. Other than that, the core of the deck was the same. We made a couple alterations to the land base, but basically it's get 5 colors by turn 5 to cast your Bring to Light. We have 4 Harness Lightnings and 4 Unlicensed Disintegrations in there to control, and a couple cool creatures on the way up if we need to curve out. Otherwise, the premise of the deck didn't change at all.
Right, cool. So we just basically put in stuff that you were happier about searching up. Was
right.
The main change.
Yeah, better bombs is exactly what we did. Those were the changes we made, and a little bit more of a playable creatures throughout the curve as well. Those Skyrider Elves are really versatile because you can play them on turn 2, you can play them on turn 3, you can play them on turn 4, etc.
What about turn 5?
You can play them on turn 5 too.
Oh, sweet.
And the Metallurgic Summonings was the biggest change.
That was a big functional change, right?
Yeah, that was the biggest change. And so all in all, yeah.
And it's worth noting that we added the metallurgic summonings in there, knowing that we couldn't hit them with Bring to Light, but we put them in there just in case there was a situation where we got really behind.
Mm-hmm.
So
somebody needs to ask me how the deck went.
that's what I was about to do. So
Okay.
I started with the word "so."
Right.
It's okay. So that said, how did we do in our testing, Graham?
This deck did everything that we wanted it to, and more. When it hit on curve, it was unstoppable. The Woodland Wanderers are the real deal. The Metallurgic Summonings dug me out of a hole one game. Having the versatility of the Cataclysmic Gearhulk, or the Goblin Dark Dwellers, or the Barrel's Expertise, or the Fumigate was great. In fact, of our tuned list, there was only one card that I actually took completely out of the deck for tuning, and that was the Shrewd Negotiation. We just didn't have enough artifacts to trade with, and it didn't really ever become something that I wanted to get. I did end up making a few other changes. I added more Verdurous Gearhulks, because it turns out that that's typically the card that I want almost like 75% of the time. If I'm going to cast a Bring to Light, it's because I want a Verdurous Gearhulk. And a lot of times I end up putting those 4 counters on my already 6/6 Woodland Wanderer, making them 10/10 trample vigilance creatures, which is super awesome. But the versatility of the Barrel's Expertise, or the Fumigates, or the Yahenni's Expertise was fantastic. And when you cast a Bring to Light with the Metallurgic Summonings in play, it is something unbelievably special to drop all that extra stuff on there. The games all went really well. We ended up going 3-1. We beat Green-Black Delirium in 3. Game 1, I curved out perfectly. I had all 5 colors on turn 5, cast a Bring to Light for Verdurous Gearhulk, and then I dropped another Woodland Wanderer after that, just overran them all. Game 2, I lost to a Distended Mindbender, because he was able to get rid of my removal and my Bring to Light in my hand, which kind of like nuked my deck. But Game 3, I was able to ramp into a 6/6 Wanderer on turn 3. And then I got a 5-color Bring to Light on turn 4 because I had a Servant of the Conduit in play for a Verdurous Gearhulk. And, an 8/8 trample on turn 4 is pretty difficult to deal with. We beat the Blue-White Flash deck in 2. I should say that we were playing against our old Gauntlet. So that does include cards like Emrakul and
Smuggler's Copter.
And Smuggler's Copter and Reflector
Reflector
Mage. Because we don't really have other decks to test it against at the moment, just because Aether Revolt is so new deck lists haven't come out.
Yeah, and because technically they're still legal. Like, they're still legal for another week, so it's probable that if we had taken this deck, we would have seen them, except for the fact that we were playing a few Aether Revolt cards in our own list, so we did cheat a little bit in that regard going ahead in time.
Right, we just decided that would probably be the best way to test it for the time being, and it performed so amazingly well. The Blue-White Flash didn't really stand much of a chance. I was able to control Gideon's incredibly well. Having 8 removal cards in the deck was super key, at least hard removal cards. Was very key in order to control all of my opponents and allow me to get my massive amounts of damage through.
Well, we also constructed the deck to dodge the counter, the spell queller. Yeah. So
right, and so it for the most part it did shut down spell queller. I did get spell queller used on me a couple of times, but I was able to take care of that for the most part. A lot of times, spell queller ended up being cast just so they had a blocker for me, which worked to my advantage. And in fact, I believe it was during that game that I had a Metallurgic Summonings in play, so they were doing a really good job of controlling me. But because Metallurgic Summoning says whenever you cast, so it's when you cast it, they couldn't stop me from getting those artifact constructs into play, and I was able to actually win by running over them with the constructs. And then we played against the Colossus Affinity deck. Those are the Metalwork Colossus. We ended up winning that in 2 as well. In that particular round, the MVP was the Barrel's Expertise was great in that deck. Also, Cataclysmic Gearhulk, because when you're flooding the board with like 6 or 7 artifacts, and I have to force my opponent to choose one to keep, it makes it really hard for them to cast cheap Metalwork Colossuses. Metalwork Colossi?
I think Colossuses.
Colossuses, yeah. And then we did end up losing against the Aetherworks Marvel deck. And I didn't feel too terrible about that. I felt like we did pretty good. They hit an Emrakul in game 1.
Actually won game.
Excuse me, I won game 1. Well, they hit an Emrakul on turn 5 in one game, and then they hit an Ulamog on turn 4 in the last game, and then really difficult to bounce back from that, just because he exiled my entire deck. Anyway, this deck was a ton of fun to play. It absolutely dominated things. It was such a freaking awesome feeling to drop 6/6 Woodland Wanderers constantly.
On turn 3 or 4, it was crazy.
I don't have enough good things to say about this deck. It was really fun to play. It worked really well. There's not too many cards that we put into this tuned version that I didn't like. There were times where I got a Fumigate that I didn't really want it, but I tried sideboarding it out a couple times and decided that I would rather risk drawing it when I don't want it than not have it when I need it.
So it's a one of on the list, right?
Right, and there it shall remain.
Question about Servant of the Conduit. Were you happy with Servant of the Conduit?
I was. So Servant of the Conduit I was happy with, not for its fixing, but for its ramp.
Right, so you were only playing 2 of those?
Yeah, and I think that's actually the right number. I don't think I would want any more of them, mostly because I don't know what I would take out in favor of them. Also, I wouldn't want to get stuck with too many of them.
Yeah, and also a couple times they were handy because they gave you energy to boost up your Harness Lightning, which allows you to kill a bigger target.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other reason why I liked having the Servant of the Conduit versus something like a Beastcaller Savant or something of that nature.
Well, there's that new 1-drop enchantment from Aether Revolt that I actually considered figuring out if we should put in the deck. I'm going to look up the name of it right now.
I'm guessing this is going to be a recurring theme of this week's podcast where we're like, I don't know what anything is called.
Yep. The 1-drop enchantment, which is called Unbridled Growth, which is just for a green. It enchants a land, and it allows you to tap your land for 1 mana of any color, and then you can sacrifice it to draw a card. Because I thought it might be good to have the card draw later once you've spent your first few turns making sure that you have all the colors you need. So if you're tapping it for red and then you drop a red source, you can just sacrifice it and draw a card. But actually, after going through testing, I still think the Servant of the Conduit is the correct choice because of the ramp. And this one doesn't ramp you, it just fixes your colors. And because of the energy, which pairs so nicely with your removal in Harness Lightning, which is really strong.
And to be honest, I never really had too much trouble getting 5 colors. There's only 1 or 2 games where I struggled to get a variety of colors. There's one game where I got stuck at 3 colors somehow with like 5 lands. That's like a freak variance thing. And there was one game where I got stuck at 4 colors for a little bit. But even with 4 colors, you can still cast a 5/5 Woodland Wanderer.
I mean, my thought is just that you guys are so impressed by Servant of the Conduit, it just feels like there should be more. That was my main thought. So, like, I mean, I'm looking at some of these cards, like, I mean, you say the mana was good, right? So it's like...
the mana was fine. I didn't have to fix the mana very often.
So then the question is, I mean, could you take out, like, an Attune with Aether?
No, because that was key to... Attune with Aether was the key to fixing the mana. Like, Attune with Aether that's what allowed me to not worry about fixing mana. So that was my mana fixing, I guess. So the Servant of the Conduit overperformed. I honestly think 2 is like the perfect number for him because I got them just as many times as I wanted, never too many times.
Sure, but getting them just as many times as you wanted was probably fairly lucky.
So let me phrase it this way. I never found myself wanting a Servant of the Conduit, but I was always happy when I got one.
So when you didn't draw it,
I wasn't missing it. I wasn't thinking, man, I really wish I had a Servant of the Conduit right now.
Well, but to Daniel's point, it is ramp. So if you did have it more often and there was a chance that more games you're casting Bring to Light on turn 4 versus turn 5, that's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, there's nothing that I would take out that I would put in for it. That's the other issue is what comes out. I guess only...
You said you didn't like Shrewd Negotiation.
We replaced that with a Virtuous Gear Hulk, which I... fully stand by. Okay. I added more Virtuous Gear Hulks because I wanted to fetch those with the bring to light
Well, you also
more
wanted,
than once
you also
per
wanted
game.
to draw them.
Well, yeah, that too. I want to draw them, and I want to be able to fetch them more than once.
I mean, you could
there were
probably
a couple game.
You could probably make an argument for playing less bring to lights and like replacing them with Vertus Gearhulks.
No, I don't think you could, because the bring to light allows you to get more than just the Vertus Gearhulks.
Yeah. So.
No, because I always want to have a bring to light. Bring to light is never a bad thing to have.
Well, unless you don't have all 5 colors of mana.
Yeah, but in like 9 games that happened twice, and I don't think there was ever a game where except for the Ulamog game, I don't think there was ever a game where I didn't eventually hit 5 colors.
All right. Well, I feel like there's a way to fit in another servant, but
yeah, and yeah, I was actually getting there.
Oh,
I
okay.
got cut off. Yeah, the one card in the deck that really underperformed was the Tireless Tracker. I rarely got the clues that I wanted or needed, or I rarely got clues, period. It was constantly a target for removal. It didn't really ever attack very often. I didn't end up using the clues even when I had them. Tireless Tracker is a great card. It's just didn't seem necessary in this deck.
Can I say something real fast about it was a target for removal? Not a mark of a bad card.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
And I just it's just not an argument against it. Like,
no, it's a good point. But I didn't need Tireless Tracker to win.
Oh.
And so if you're asking me what can we take out to put in more Servant of the Conduits, the only card on the list that I'm looking at that I would be willing to give up would be the Tireless Tracker.
Right, and that's not the kind of thing you want to get with Bring to Light. So I can totally understand. It's sort of like a backup, win con,
right.
sort of.
Well, it was in there for a couple of reasons. One of them is to give you artifacts early so that you can do the extra 3 damage with your Unlicensed Disintegration, and which helps that make that card better. And then also the card that we ended up taking out, which was the Shrewd Negotiation. It was a way to make sure that we had more artifacts available that we wouldn't mind swapping with some of their creatures. It didn't happen to come up in this testing run that we did, but as usual, it was a very limited number of instances, so you would call that a small sample size, I guess, because I feel like Shrewd Negotiation should still hang out in the sideboard, because if there's something really great that you want to take on turn 4 or 5 from your opponent, then I think that is still very valuable. Like, here's your clue, thank you for your Gear Hulk or whatever. So
yeah. And that's a good point though, Colin. Is nothing that we're taking out necessarily is getting completely removed from the deck. Mostly it's just getting put into the sideboard, and something else is replacing it on the main board. So the key with this deck is sideboarding,
which we did very much so in this testing
to great effect.
Another question: Yahenni's Expertise, did that ever get played?
No, it didn't. However, I still don't want to take it out of the deck because I am completely on board with its merits. So there were times where I wanted to play it. There was one particular instance where I was like, I need to fetch Yahenni's Expertise, but it was against Blue-White Flash, and my opponent had 3 mana up.
Oh yeah.
And so I didn't pick it because I didn't want to get spell quellered.
So Barrel's Expertise, that's interesting that one.
That wrecked the Colossus deck, because basically you remove the ramp things and then like 2 of the Colossuses back to their hand, and then they just can't play them again. They're just stuck in their hand.
Not only that, but bouncing 3 creatures is a really hard thing to come back from, especially if I've already got a 6/6 Woodland Wanderer on board and maybe a Tireless Tracker or a 3/3 Skyrider Elf. And there were times where I was swinging for 8 damage on turn 4, and being able to remove all the blockers after that and swinging for even more damage on turn 5 is crazy good. It's a finishing card for sure.
Were you able to use the other ability where you cast the free card?
Yeah, I think the one of the times I cast it, I used it to cast removal. So bounce 3 things and then just destroy something else.
Right, like you bounced 3 things you cared less about and then destroyed the thing that you really hated.
Right, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it actually looks like it might be really powerful. the more I think about it. Like I hadn't really thought about it. I think when you I think it was you, Graham, that suggested putting that one in the deck. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking like, I don't know, this doesn't really seem like the kind of card this deck is going to want. And then, but like the more I look at it, the more I'm just like, maybe this card's just really good. And it doesn't even really matter whether this is the right deck for it or not.
Sure, and I totally understand your hesitancy with bounce cards in general, especially when they're like bounce a single card.
But this thing is some serious tempo.
Right, and if you're bouncing 3 creatures, and if those creatures are 3 or more like converted mana costs, it's going to be a couple turns to recover from a single bounce spell. Like that's a pretty heavy hit, especially when you can cast a second card immediately after it. I think that Barrel's Expertise is a great card.
Huh. Cool.
It definitely, this deck put a lot more board pressure than it just looks when you're looking at the list. For example, there was one of the games against Black-Green Delirium where there was just so much pressure on the board that even with a hand full of good cards and the mana to cast one of them, like I think one of them was either a Kalitas, an Ishkana, or a Grim Flayer with Delirium on, and your opponent's looking at this board on the other side going, all these creatures dodge my grasp of darkness. I can't kill them. And I can cast this Kalitas, but I'm just going to get trampled over, even with the lifelink. And, so it's just crazy how big this deck got really, really
Yeah,
fast.
I mean, Woodland Wanderer is like a problem for a lot of decks. Like it's insanely large. So yeah, it kind of takes over.
Exactly. So when you're in that situation anyway, where even if you're at parity with your opponent, they're like, okay, I've got a couple of 4 toughness creatures, so I could probably survive a turn or 2 of this trample while I figure out how to get my next threats into play, and then boom, lands Barrel's Expertise, and they're like, well, never mind. I'm blocking with my one remaining 2 toughness creature now, and just taking 12 damage. So it was a big deal, I think.
Cool. Glad it went well.
Yeah. So I think the debate is now going to be using this version of the deck or the ally version of the deck. So we will post an alternate list to the Bring to Light deck that uses ally creatures, and we will tune and test that one and post it up on our Tapped Out. We have another section for decks that are sort of our pet projects that don't get brewed on the podcast, and I think that it might be an interesting matchup to see how they go together.
I would say so far this is probably the most powerful and consistent deck we have built, which includes the energy deck, which was both powerful and consistent, but the Bring to Light factor really has that finishing move that it has that top end that the energy deck didn't. The energy deck had a tendency to kind of sputter out. If you didn't kill your opponent by turn 6 or 7, you kind of hit a wall. That's not true with this deck at all.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, great. Graham, thank you for the recap and the great discussion. And I think now we will move on and we will talk about our impressions after pre-releasing Aether Revolt. So Graham and I both pre-released, and I have some thoughts and observations, but I wanted to talk in particular about how viable certain strategies are based on the new mechanics, Revolt and Improvise. So quick recap, Revolt triggers just like Delirium triggers if the conditions are met for the turn. So if any permanent you control leaves the battlefield that turn, you have Revolt for that turn. And there are a lot of cards that sort of take advantage of this, like when this creature enters the battlefield, if you have Revolt, you can destroy a target tapped creature, or it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, or when it enters the battlefield, you can create a servo. So there are these little edgy kind of things that just add up if you can figure out a good way to get Revolt. And the other mechanic is called Improvise, and this mechanic is actually a cost reduction mechanic where after you pay for your mana cost on something, you can tap artifacts to pay for the rest of its colorless cost. So it reduces any artifact that you have in play, you can tap to reduce the cost of the spell, which is kind of, I think, a much stronger direction to move for Standard than Revolt, which I feel like a lot of the payoff cards aren't as great. However, there are some, like one card what we talked about a while ago, I believe called Fatal Push, that makes it basically doubles the size of the creature you can remove with that card with Revolt. So I think here and there are some good Revolt cards, but overall, my opinion is that Improvise is going to be a much bigger deal for Standard. What do you think, Graham?
I agree. I think Revolt is a fun, limited trick, and I think Improvise has lasting potential throughout Standard. Revolt is inconsistent, and it has some potential. There are certain cards where it might come in handy. A Hidden Stash, is that what it's called? Hidden Stash? Hidden Cache? Hidden Stash comes to mind as a card that it might be useful outside of Limited, but in general, kind of like your Cohort or older abilities like that, they'll be useful in Limited, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some very broken things you're going to be able to do with clues in Standard, where you can generate a bunch of clues for turn and just tap to do a whole bunch of extra things, especially because there's an artifact card called Inspiring Statuary, which gives all of your non-artifact spells Improvise, which seems like it just opens the door to casting a whole bunch of things for free. So I'm excited to play with that card later and see if we can't find a way to break that. But yeah, I feel like there sort of the idea with Revolt is like, okay, I'm attacking with my 1/1 servo and this other thing, and maybe I'll get an extra damage through because my opponent doesn't want to block and kill my servo and give me Revolt for my second main phase. And eking through those little bits of damage, like usually your opponent's just like, okay, fine, I'll take one. Not a big deal. And then you're sitting there with these Revolt cards in your hand going, like this card is kind of playable for 2 mana. I mean, it's really playable even in Standard for 2 mana if I have Revolt, but my opponent's just not giving it to me. And putting cards into the deck that trigger Revolt consistently, I think you really have to go kind of all in on that strategy to make sure that you're doing it consistently if you're going to be playing these cards. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a good sack outlet or something, it's just not only that, but in your hand.
The payoffs I didn't think were worth the trouble. Usually, it's an additional maybe +1/+1 counter on a creature that comes into play, or sometimes you can give an opponent's creature -1/-1. I just didn't think that the good stuff was good enough to go through all the trouble to trigger it.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 cards that I think are probably good enough for real. One of them is Fatal Push, which we talked about, which destroys a creature with converted mana cost 2 or less. If you have Revolt, it can be 4 or less. And then the other one is a ramp card called Hidden Herbalists for 1 and a green. It's a 2/2. And if you have Revolt, you can add green to your mana pool when it comes into play. But other than that, getting another a +1/+1 counter here and there is not as great. There is a card called Vengeful Rebel for 2 and a black that if you have Revolt, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3 until end of turn. That might be able to edge you out in certain circumstances, but that's kind of it. Like the other ones just aren't as good, I don't think.
I'm seeing like at least 2 more that I think have constructed potential. Okay, you already talked about Herbalists, but I was going to say the Greenwheel Liberator, which is the 2 mana 2/1 that gets +2/+2 if you have Revolt. And then the other one is Narnam Renegade, which is a 1/2 Death Touch for 1, and then it gets +1/+1 if you have Revolt. So, first of all, as we've seen with the Dryad, the Delirium Dryad,
Gnarlwood Dryad.
Gnarlwood Dryad, yeah. You can play 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch creatures. Like they're pretty darn good on defense against aggro decks, and especially if you can pump them, they become like decent threats that obviously you can't block without. And with a toughness of 3, like you have to put something significant in front of the Renegade to kill it. So, and obviously I've heard a lot of people talk about how Narnam Renegade's going to be probably played quite a bit in Modern because you have the fetch lands, but I think there's probably enough things that you can sacrifice or creatures that are dying so that Renegade is definitely going to see play. Like I think both of those cards will see play in Standard. So I guess I'm taking the opposite. I'm taking a different viewpoint than you guys, at least in regards to. I mean, those look like constructed level rates to me. Those don't look like limited only cards.
Sure. Okay. Well, I hope that I'm wrong, because it is very powerful to be able to trigger that yourself. Because I think there's a lot of comparison drawn to an earlier mechanic called Morbid, which is if a creature died this turn, then it's turned on, and they're very, very similar. But
it's just so much easier
to control.
Yeah, it's so much easier to trigger Revolt. Like, there's just so many things that do stuff like that. So, I mean, there's flicker effects, there's there's effects like clues, there's just all kinds of things that will trigger Revolt. It doesn't have to be, it's not as narrow as Morbid is.
Sure. You can do things like any of the spells that create tokens that get exiled at the end of turn will trigger Revolt.
Right. Any artifact or enchantment that you sacrifice, anything like that. So, or land. So like Evolving Wilds, for example, would trigger Revolt.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, you know what, Daniel? We should try to break it today. Let's see if we can do it. And maybe I think that card, Narnum Renegade, is a very good example. So let's see what we can do to do that when we brew today. I think we're going to try and brew what we on the podcast think could be a direction that green-black is going to go, since Emrakul has been banned, and I think that Delirium is going to be less of an attractive style. I'm sure it's still going to be around, but I want to see what we can do with something a little more aggressive in green and black, because I think there's a lot more aggressive creatures. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about a card that completely wrecked me at the pre-release, that I feel like could have potential to be albeit slightly inferior replacement to Smuggler's Copter. And this card is called Aether Harvester.
So I completely agree with Colin here. Aether Harvester is a vehicle for 3, and it's 3/5 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and you may pay 1 energy, and it gains lifelink until end of turn. And most importantly, it's got a crew of 1, which is why it's probably most comparable to Smuggler's Copter, because you can pilot it with Thraves. It doesn't come into play on turn 2 like Smuggler's Copter does, but turn 3 is not a bad alternative, especially since it has potential for lifelink and it's got a higher toughness.
Yeah, the 5 toughness is a really big deal, and your opponent gaining 3 life every turn is also a problem. So turning their 1 power creature sideways to a swing for 3 in the air, I think Smuggler's Copters proved that is just really devastating. And although this one doesn't give you cards, it does give you a bit more inevitability by raising your life total. So I think it's something to worry about, and maybe something we should even consider looking at if in aggressive strategy, if we're thinking about doing anything with energy.
And to reiterate, it's got a toughness of 5, which means it doesn't die to bolt. It makes it much more difficult to kill.
Yep. So just wanted to put that out there and say that my prediction is we're going to see these guys everywhere. Right now, they're only about $5, but I expect that to shoot up. So, yeah. Get your Aether Harvesters. What do you think, Daniel? Do you agree or disagree?
It's hard to tell. It looks like a card that would be just take over the game in limited. Just so hard to get through, and as a win condition, and just you can't race it. Not sure about constructed, actually. I don't know. I may be wrong. You guys maybe. I mean, you've played with it, or you played against it at least. I'm not sure. It seems a little bit expensive to me, but yeah, I could be way off on this one.
I mean, 3 for 3/5 flying doesn't seem super expensive to me, especially since you can give it lifelink.
No,
it's pretty easy to get 1 energy per turn too.
Yeah, I mean, you might be right. I don't know. I just look at it and it doesn't scream like take over the game. But I mean, there might be a shelf for it that I'm not currently seeing. Like, I haven't really thought about it that much. So, but yeah, it doesn't scream like constructed all-star to me. Like a counter example would be Heart of Kirin, which is the 2-mana 4/4 flying vigilance vehicle that's crew 3, but you can activate it by removing loyalty counters from a planeswalker. That one strikes me as more impressive. just because you can leave it on defense. It's cheaper. You can activate it without.
You can activate it without having a creature on the board.
Right. Well, no, but you do need a planeswalker. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, you guys might be right. I mean, I haven't played against it. I do see how it does.
I don't think you're wrong about Heart of Kirin. To be clear, I think that card is pretty fantastic, and the rest of the Magic world definitely agrees with us, considering it's already at $22.
Oh, is it really? Oh, it's a mythic.
Yeah, it's a mythic and it's legendary. So, and it's crew 3. So that's what you get for the only 2 casting cost is you get extra crew. And in vehicle decks that are already running crew 3, no problem. I think that's true. But in incidental decks, I think one of the reasons that Smuggler's Copter was so ubiquitous is because of its 1 crew cost. And so that's why I think Aether's Fur Harvester is going to see a lot more play in a lot more variety of decks than Heart of Kirin, even though I do think that Heart of Kirin is definitely an extremely powerful and very, very playable card.
Interestingly, Heart of Kirin is a good counter to Smuggler's Copter. Like, if it had been in Standard when Copter was, I think maybe people would have been a little less shell-shocked by that. But, I mean, with Heart of Kirin and Heart of Kirin in the format and Smuggler's Copter gone, it seems like Planeswalkers are kind of poised to take over now.
Yeah, I think so too. And especially because there's some, with Oath of Ajani entering as well, it's really going to help out Planeswalkers. I think we're going to see a lot of Planeswalkers. Cool. All right, well, that said, that's great. Let's get to brewing. This week, like I said, we're going to be playing with Golgari, and we're going to try to do a Golgari beatdown style deck that doesn't monkey around with the graveyard, so we're no longer grappling with the past. We're no longer... traversing the Ulvenwold.
I'll always be grappling with the past. I can't escape it.
Yeah, we're no longer going to be sacrificing strange, dirtly books. It's going to be great. We're just going to smash face. So we have a couple of different options for directions we can go in this realm. There is there's basically the Oprah says everybody gets a counter direction, or there's the energy, or maybe there's a mix. So I'm curious to see what you guys think of, do we have to go all in on one of these strategies, or do you think that having enough energy to fuel an engine and then counters to bring it over the top, or what are you guys thinking? Are we looking at little death touch creatures too? Like, I'm very curious to see where you guys see us starting out on this one.
Okay, well, to answer one of your earlier questions, I don't think that we need to necessarily go all in on counters or all in on energy, because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. There are plenty of good aggro cards in green and black that use energy to give themselves +1/+1 counters. That's the first point. The second point is, as we've observed in previous decks that we've built, you don't have to have... If there's energy in a deck, it doesn't need to be central to the deck. You can use energy as a smaller subset of the deck, so it doesn't have to rely on the energy. So we can do both, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy cards that are just fine on their own. Like Harness Lightning is a perfect example, or Aether Hub.
Or Attune with Aether, or something like that. Absolutely.
Great, I'm in. Let's do it.
So I'm all for both. I think that energy and +1/+1 counters are absolutely a great way to go.
Great. So, do we want to start with creatures, or do we want to start with removal and get that out of the way?
Creatures.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So,
shall we start with 1-drops?
Let's start with 1-drops.
Well, I'm going to steal your thunder, Daniel, and I am going to submit one of your new favorite cards. It's called Greenbelt Rampager.
No! My favorite card.
I know. It costs 1 green for a 3/4. Mind blowing, I know. And it says when Greenbelt Rampager enters the battlefield, pay 2 energy. If you can't, return Greenbelt Rampager to its owner's hand, and you get 1 energy. So this card's kind of a win-win. Either you get a 3/4 elephant creature for 1, or you get an energy, which is great too.
You're forgetting the last part.
You get a revolt trigger.
You get a revolt trigger.
Oh, you certainly do. I didn't even consider that.
And you still wanted it. That's how good this card is. You only have to
Yeah.
meet 2 of the conditions, and you still want it. And then there's a third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Greenbelt
So-
Rampager on turn 1 to give you 1 energy, and then into Narnum Renegade, which we just talked about as a 1/2 Death Touch for green, and Revolt gets +1/+1. Seems pretty good to me.
Yeah,
do you guys think?
I like both those cards.
I'm into it.
Cool. So 2 1-drops so far. Let's keep it going. Daniel, go.
Okay, I have two ideas here. One of the ideas depends on how revolting we're going to be. We're already somewhat revolting because I'm pretty sure we're going to be playing Fatal Push, right?
Right.
I mean, seems really likely. Okay, we're already playing Narnum Renegade,
Yes.
so we already have 8 revolting cards.
Gross.
So
Okay.
my question is, do we want to play a card whose name I can't remember? Ah, there we are. So my question is, do we want to play Unbridled Growth, which is a 1 green enchant land that gives the land
Right.
the ability to tap for any mana, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. So this is a card that you can play on turn 1 that can trigger Revolt in subsequent turns.
So it's a good question. I have a counter question. How many 1-drops is too many 1-drops? Is that even a thing?
I don't think
Not
that's a
in an
thing.
aggro deck. No, that's not a thing in an aggro
I don't think
deck.
that's a thing in any deck. If you want as
Yeah.
many 1-drops as you can get. You want as many 0-drops as you can get, to be honest, but those don't really exist in Standard, so
That's not true. Ornithopter.
I meant good ones. Like if we get, anyway. The point is, like, yes, you want as many good 1-drops as possible. The problem is you just run out of 1-drops really fast because there aren't that many good 1-drops. So that's why people tend to fill their decks with 2 and 3 drops. But I mean, if you look at
makes
Legacy, those decks are chock full of 1-drops because 1-drops are great. Anyway, so why don't we wait on Unbridled Growth? I just kind of leave that hanging there, knowing that if we go really far in the Revolt direction, then we're definitely. Do we agree that we want to play it if we are going in a Revolt direction?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it depends on how many other Revolt triggers we find, because I don't think we need it for the land fixing at all. We're only running 2 colors.
No, but I
Well,
mean, 1 mana.
yeah, but also, if we play something like Grasp of Darkness, we might want double black early, and if we have more green mana to accommodate all these 1-drops that we want to play on turn 1, it can actually help us get our removal faster.
Okay, that's fair. So I will agree that we'll set it aside for the time being and come back to it if need be.
Okay.
Or, as another 1-drop in a very similar vein, there's Renegade Map, which is a 1-cost artifact, enters the battlefield tapped, tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So it fixes your mana, puts an artifact in the graveyard, and is a Revolt trigger.
I mean, yeah, I think the card's solid. I mean, Revolt triggers are aggressive, right? Because they pump our creatures.
Right.
It's almost like a pump spell.
Right.
And it fixes mana. So.
Sure. But I mean, there's other options too. There's like Terrarian. I think maybe we're getting a little far afield though. I mean, we're not even sure that we're gonna play Unbridled Growth at this point. So I think maybe we should just move on to the 2 drop slot and just see what we're looking at.
See what needs Revolt to be activated before we even start figuring out how to trigger it.
But we also have 4 Revolt enablers with the elephant. So there's that. The Greenbelt Rampager. So I wonder if when we're looking at 2-drops, we would consider or make sure we're doing something that could actually turn the Greenbelt Rampager into more of a card that we cast over and over again and keeps bouncing back to our hand. So if we have 2 energy, we have to pay that. There's no if. So if we have... Okay,
you mean when you're casting Greenbelt Rampager, you have to pay the 2. You can't just keep bouncing it over and over again.
Right, unless you have another creature or another card that you can respond to its enter the battlefield trigger by spending that energy so that you no longer have it to pay for it when it lands.
And what card can you think of that would do that?
Well, pretty much most of the creatures that you can spend energy to pump them up or do things with, right?
That I was definitely teeing you up for a very obvious card.
I thought you were making me sound like an idiot.
Was it?
Nope.
Was it a toothy creature of some kind?
It might have been reminiscent to a feline house pet. The card that we're after is called Long Tusk Cub, and it alone is the card we want for a very specific reason. Paying energy to put +1/+1 counters on it is not conditional to anything other than having energy. So there are other cards that can pay energy in order to give themselves counters or do other things, but most of them are conditional that they're attacking, that they're blocking, that they're doing something else. Whereas Long Tusk Cub, it's just a pay 2 energy, get a +1/+1 counter. Oh, and for the record, Long Tusk Cub is a 2/2 for 1 on the green. When it deals combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy, and then you can pay 2 energy to give it +1/+1 counters.
Card is sick.
Long Tusk Cub is the real deal. It is a freaking awesome card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
So we're pretty heavily in green. Can you guys think of any black creatures that you think would be good to consider also?
I have a couple of options. I'm not sure how well they necessarily fit into our theme so far. I like Winding Constrictor, which is a 2/3 creature for a black and a green, and it says if 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are placed on that permanent instead. Similarly, that applies to yourself as a player. The same rule. I don't know why they doubled that text, but that's okay. It's kind of like what's that card from Cons?
It's kind of like a Hardened Scales.
Thank you. It's kind of like a Hardened Scales. It's a walking, talking Hardened Scales. And I think that if we are going the +1/+1 counter route, especially since the Narnim Renegade could potentially enter with counters, the Long Tusk Cubs would potentially gain counters.
Ooh,
imagine cracking the Long Tusk Cub with a 1 or maybe 2 Winding Constrictors in play, and then just going super crazy big on that.
Oh yeah, this is cool. Yeah, I'm into it.
Another one that I had considered, and you guys probably, well, it's a great card. I don't think there's going to be any argument about that, but whether it fits in the deck is the Gifted Aetherborn, which is a 2/3 Death Touch lifelink creature for black. And that's probably the biggest argument against it, is that its casting cost is black. But Death Touch and lifelink is just so juicy, I couldn't not bring it up.
That was actually the literally the argument I was going to make against it. So
The
again,
black.
Graham, you steal my thunder.
Wait, but no, Daniel, there's no need to have the thunder stolen because your enchantment fixes colors. So it's much more likely if we play 4 of that enchantment on the land that we could have black on turn 2.
It seems like way too much work for a card that is good but not like overwhelmingly good. And if we're definitely going with the Winding Constrictor, I think we want to go in the direction of more cards that get counters.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. And I have one of those prepped as well. Do you guys recall from Kaladesh the card called Fretwork Colony, which is a 1/1 for 1 and a black, and it says it can't block, which is fine because we're playing aggro. And it says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on Fretwork Colony, and you lose a life. So you get one of those guys out, you get a Winding Constrictor out. All of a sudden, it's getting 2 +1/+1 counters per turn.
Seems good.
I'm underwhelmed.
Yeah,
I
it's black. It's black, so I submitted that one.
I like blocking. I mean, I know I'm weak, but I don't know. I like blocking.
You like blocking? I thought your favorite card was an artifact that couldn't block.
Oh, what is my favorite card?
I thought your favorite card right now is the Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Oh yeah, I do love Scrap Heap Scrounger, but it's
also can't block.
Yeah, okay, fine, you got me. All right. I guess I just don't like this particular card. It's not because it can't block.
That's fair.
I just don't like it that much. I don't think it's enough. I think we're dealing with a lot of cards that are a lot more powerful, and that we can do better.
Okay, well, what you got?
What do you guys think of Asylum Visitor as an option?
I don't know what it is.
So Asylum Visitor is 1 and a black for a 3/1, which I believe are pretty aggressive stats. And it says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So it can sort of give your aggro deck some fuel after turn 4 when you start running out of cards or your opponent starts running out of 1-for-1 removal when they're taking out all your little creatures, and to basically make it so you can draw more little creatures.
Counter proposal.
Okay.
Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Okay, read it to me.
Which is a new card from Aether Revolt. It is 1 black, 1 in a black, so 2 for a 2/1 menace. And when it comes in the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy. And its ability is, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, draw a card and you lose 1 life. So it's a 2-drop that stocks your hand given certain conditions. It also has evasion, pseudo-evasion with menace, and sort of combos with our other energy theme.
Energy, which I like. I like that card.
Okay.
So it's sort of...
because it's versatile.
It fills your desire for some sort of control-ish card drawing, and also, so it's sort of similar card to a Silent Visitor. That's what I'm trying to say. But I think fits a bit better in this deck.
Okay. So that's good. I like that one. How many... Let's see where we're at as far as how we're doing on humans, because... Let's see. That's a human. That's an elephant. That's a cat. That's an elf. And a snake. We're not doing well on humans. That's sadly, our types are not very closely related. Otherwise, I would have submitted Metallic Mimic, because that's a pretty cool 2-drop, but it doesn't really work in this particular deck. I was going to think about Hamlet Captain, which gives all other attacking humans +1/+1, which seemed like something we'd want to do.
Ooh, tricksy.
Right. How are we? What number of 2-drops are we at right now, Colin?
Well, I haven't put numbers actually in the deck, but so far we only have 2-2-drops on the list, so we should keep going.
Okay, so how about, we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think. Did we talk about Greenwheel Liberator? If we're going to go into the Revolt realm, that seems like a card that is worth exploring for the deck. Greenwheel Liberator is a 2/1 for 1 and a green, and it has Revolt that says Greenwheel Liberator enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn.
I like it.
Yeah, that's good.
Daniel?
I think it's good. I don't think it's amazing, but definitely think it's a possible.
It's potentially
it combos
4/3 for 2. Yeah.
It's a potential 5/4 with Winding Constrictor.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
It's probably something we want to consider here.
There's another one that we should talk about called Scrounging Bandar, which is 1 and a green for a 0/0, which enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So with the Winding Constrictor, that would help. But it also says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 creatures from Scrounging Bandar onto another target creature.
So if you move them, does that get pumped by Winding Constrictor? Oh yeah, it would be placed.
Yeah, it would.
Oh yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, I remember that back from my heroic days, playing in those old ones and with hardened scales.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's probably a 4 of, because it's on a little bit lower power level, but it looks like really synergistic. Actually, it also activates Revolt if you take both the counters off. So yeah, I like that card. We should play at least a couple.
Yeah, I agree. We can talk about numbers later in a little bit once we get a little deeper.
What about Hidden Herbalists? How do you guys feel about Hidden Herbalists? Hidden Herbalists. How do you feel?
I think it's pretty good.
I don't like how hard the name is to say.
Hidden Herbalists. Well, you know what they're growing, right? I mean, why would you need to be hidden if you're an herbalist?
Pixie dust.
So maybe it would just slow
magic
the deck
roses.
down. Yeah, I don't know.
Mushrooms?
No, it allow you to transcend your opponent's deck by seeing through its crazy scheme.
Oh,
hey guys, you really want to attack? I don't know.
We should just call this card Conspiracy Theorist. Oh, anyway. Yeah. So, thoughts on Hidden Herbalists?
I like its potential for playing lots of creatures very early, which is kind of an important thing in an aggro deck. So you play the Hidden Herbalist for 2 on turn 2 after triggering a Revolt with Name It, and then you get to either play. Sure. And then you get to play maybe 2 1-drops or another 2-drop. Potential for putting out a second 2-drop is pretty nice.
I submit that we have reached critical mass where we want Unbridled Growth.
Unbridled Growth?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I'll allow it.
Seems good.
And then once that happened, then I'm more interested in Hidden Herbalists.
Okay. So since Collected Company is out of the format and getting more creatures into your hand is good, and we're going to be running a lot of creatures, how do you guys feel about Duskwatch Recruiter?
I am into it.
1 and a green for a 2/2, 2 and a green tap.
I think it's a 4 of. I think it's probably more like a 2 of, because it's not otherwise super aggro, but it does help later in the game when we've spent cast all the cards in our hand because everything's super cheap.
I feel like it might not be flipping as often as it did in other formats because there's more stuff going on early in the game, but
actually, that's a good thing, because we don't actually want to flip Duskwatch Recruiter, because we want it for its recruitability.
Yeah, I mean, having your creatures cost 1 less, which is what the backside of Duskwatch Recruiter says, is great, but we're not really playing expensive creatures.
I also don't like that it doesn't combo with Winding Constrictor, which is kind of the direction we've gone here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, here's another card that combos with Winding Restrictor. It's called Rot Shambler. 1 and a green for a 1/1. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it.
That's basically an Unruly Mob, Ninth Bridge Patrol.
Right.
Pick
And then
your. There are lots of versions of it.
1 snake, and it's two counters for each creature that dies.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I don't want my creatures to die though.
Well, it might not have a choice, right?
You're so right, Colin.
Like, I always want my creatures to survive. Whenever I play a creature in Magic, I really don't
You're
want
going to
to
go
die.
all the way, little buddy.
That's right.
Okay, so I don't hate it.
I kind of hate it. Well,
Okay.
see, I don't like Unruly Mob. So I think that's kind of why I don't want to play this either. And this isn't a control deck. Like, we're trying to beat down.
No, it's true, but think about your Bandar, right? So you move the token, you move the things onto a different creature, trigger a revolt, and pump your Rot Shambler.
So here is
That's aggressive.
it is. But here's my counter to that, because in my experience, creatures like Unruly Mob, Ninth Bridge Patrol, they are most effective when you have an ability to wipe your entire board in one fell swoop with some sort of bomb. So, for instance, in our white-black sacrifice deck, the Ninth Bridge Patrol was freaking sick because we could drop a Cataclysmic Gear Hulk, keep the Gear Hulk, and Ninth Bridge Patrol wipe out like 8 of our servos or other creatures or whatever, and then all of a sudden we have a 9/9 Ninth Bridge Patrol. I don't see that scenario happening in this deck.
You know, there are cards that can sort of create that situation. There's Yahenni Undying Partisan. You guys familiar with this card?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, for the uninitiated amongst our listeners, it's a 3-mana 2/2 haste black. It's 2 and a black. And then its ability was a bunch of abilities. Well, two other abilities other than haste. When one of your opponent's creatures dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Hello, Winding Constrictor. And then the last ability is sacrifice another creature. Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn. So you have the aforementioned outlet for sweeping
revolt.
Yeah.
Sweeping, yeah.
Well, not just revolt, but the combo for the card I don't like.
For a Rot Shambler. Okay, and actually that's a really good point. One thing we should point out about Yahenni, though, is that he's legendary.
Is Yahenni a boy?
Oh, that's a great question.
Do we have to?
Based on the picture...
Nah,
looks like it.
Do we need to gender everything?
But also, Yahenni is... yeah. Actually, from the picture, you can't tell.
Yahenni is a person.
Is an Aether
I mean,
we'll
vampire.
We will
Person
refer to them
vampire.
as
Them.
they.
Yeah, they.
So
Yahenni is a they at this point.
Yeah, so just to point out, they are a legendary creature. It's something to keep in mind. I think that Yahenni is absolutely great for the deck. I think that minimum 2, and I actually, you know what, Daniel? I really like your point about how it pairs with Rot Shambler, because if we swing with everything and you say we've got like 4 or 5 creatures on the board, and they block everything but the Rot Shambler, you just sacrifice everything to Yahenni, including Yahenni, and then all of a sudden, boom, you've got a big Rot Shambler.
Yeah,
I'm almost talking myself out of Rot Shambler, though. After that. I'm terrible.
But do we like Yahenni? Rot Shambler
I like
aside?
Yahenni.
I like Yahenni. I absolutely like Yahenni.
Yeah.
It's a haste creature, which is important. It gets counters, which is also important in the deck. And they're super badass.
It's also a revolt trigger. Creates a revolt trigger.
It totally is. And look at that picture. They're just totally like stiff arming this bro's face with like his epic Aether fist, and like, man, that's so brutal.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's like Marshawn Lynch is just like smashing some dude's skull into the ground.
Yeah, that guy looks like a jerk. He sounds great for a beatdown deck.
Yeah, it looks like the kind of guy I want on my team.
Okay, so since we're talking legendary creatures, I feel like we should also talk about Rishkar.
Oh yeah, we
Pima
should.
Renegade.
We sure should.
Absolutely.
2 and a green for a 2/2. When Rishkar, Pima, and Renegade enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures.
Ooh.
And so you basically support 2. I don't know why they didn't just say support 2. Each creature you control with a counter on it has tap to add force to your mana pool.
Oh my god. This is exactly what we want.
Done and done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, since we're talking about legendary creatures, if you guys look backwards in standard for creatures that are legendary and give +1/+1 counters, I think a card that was underutilized. How about Drana, Liberator of Malakir, 2/3 flying first strike for 1 black. Whenever Drana, Liberator of Malakir deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control.
I'd give it a shot.
Yeah.
Card's powerful.
Sure is. Okay.
Can't believe it's still in the format. Feels like it's been around forever.
Yep. Well, they changed the format, so.
I have a sort of a random kind of out of left field suggestion. I don't know how you guys are going to feel. It's a blast from the past. Catacomb Sifter from Battle for Zendikar.
You're gonna make me look that up, Daniel.
You don't know what Catacomb Sifter does already? Oh, so disappointed.
I do.
It's one of my pet cards when it came out, but it is 1 green-black for 2/3 Eldrazi, and when it comes into play, you make a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion, which can obviously be sacrificed to make 1 mana. And then its other ability is whenever another creature you control dies, you scry 1.
So, Daniel, I think that you've just sparked some sort of genius about trying to tie blocks together, because do you know what Scions are good for in Aether Revolt?
Nuh-uh.
Triggering Revolt.
Oh, yeah.
They sure are. You can sack that right to your Yeheni.
Yeah, it's right to your Yeheni or right to your mana.
Yeah, right to your
if you need
nothing.
to.
Yeah.
To the ether.
To whatever the heck you want it to.
Sacrificing
I like
to
that
the
card.
Fires of Revolution.
Sweet.
So here's an interesting potential synergistic card that could be fun in this deck. Fairgrounds Trumpeter is a 2/2 elephant for 2 and a green. It says at the beginning of each end step, if a +1/+1 counter was placed on a permanent under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Fairgrounds Trumpeter. Do you think that's too slow?
Well, I mean, if we're like, well, we have 4 Winding Constrictors, but we want another Winding Constrictor, maybe that would be the way to go. Like, if Winding Constrictor is so good that we just want more, then I could see playing that card. But as it stands...
But he can only put +1/+1 counters on himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it does combo with all the +1/+1 counter stuff we have in the deck. Yeah, you're right. I'm less excited about that than I am Winding Constrictor, just because of a 2/2 for 3 is pretty meh.
Okay. Do you guys like Undergrowth Champion for this deck?
Ooh, I forgot. God, there's so many old cards I forgot about.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things is to play old cards with new mechanics, because I think that Wizards does that on purpose, where they try to somewhat tie things together so that you will do this. But most people don't. So Undergrowth Champion to me seems like a pretty
So
cool
you're
card.
going to need to... Can you...
I always consider that to be a defensive card, though.
Can you say what it is again?
Yeah, I was yep, absolutely. It's a 2/2 elemental for 1 green. So it's got 2 parts to its ability, and I'm going to read them in reverse order because I think that the second ability is more important to the card in general. I don't know why they did it that way. But it has landfall for whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Undergrowth Champion. And its other ability says, if damage would be dealt to Undergrowth Champion while it has a +1/+1 counter on it, prevent that damage and remove a +1/+1 counter from Undergrowth Champion. So one of you guys said that you usually consider that to be a defensive card.
Yeah. Because it's a great blocker, because nothing can kill it until all the +1/+1 counters are gone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree. But to that same point, it's a great attacker because nothing can kill it until all those +1/+1 counters are gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, so when the card came out, I believe that fetch lands were in the format. Am I mistaken here?
No, you were not mistaken, because they were in the Khans of Tarkir.
Actually, that's an important question that we should probably address right now anyway. Because of Revolt, are we going to run
Evolving Wilds?
Evolving Wilds.
I think we should. I think we should at least try it in the first draft of the deck and see what it does.
Okay, well,
it's a really, really easy way to trigger Revolt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the thing.
And with that in consideration, now how does it make you feel about Undergrowth Champion?
I like Undergrowth Champion, but for 1 green, I'd rather just draw a Nissa Voice of Zendikar.
Oh yeah, Nissa. Let's pivot to Nissa Voice of Zendikar, because both of you guys seem a little bit lukewarm on Undergrowth Champion. That's okay. You've only hurt my feelings a little bit.
Okay, well, we can try harder.
I've been singing your praises this whole brew, Graham.
I know it's fantastic. I am shell shocked. I don't even know what to do with it, Daniel.
Keep it up, Graham.
putting out
That's what
cards
you should do with it. Keep it up. Keep up the good work.
I keep suggesting cards, and you keep telling me you like them. The world is upside down. I don't know what's going on.
I believe Colin wanted to say something.
No, it's fine. Nissa is a 3-mana planeswalker, which is always good. Coming to play with 3 loyalty. +1, she puts a 0/1 green plant token creature onto the battlefield. And then a -2, she puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So with the snake, 1 snake, that's a lot of good value right there.
I like Nissa.
Yeah, I definitely want to try out like 1 or 2 of those in this deck. Because we need some ways to sort of push through, and this is a way to make our creatures more powerful and do more damage, etc., etc. So I'm into giving it a shot.
Okay, so I have an important question about the deck in general. Do we want to run any 4-drops?
It depends on how powerful the
depends.
4-drop is.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, on that note, in Aether Revolt, there is an instant called Lifecrafter's Gift, and it's 3 and a green, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it.
Whoa, you said that way too fast. Can you go back?
Really?
What does it do?
Really? I thought I said it pretty slow. Okay. Lifecrafter's Gift is 3 and a green. It's an instant. It says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
Okay.
Then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it.
Got it.
So essentially put 2 +1/+1 counters on one creature, and then put +1/+1 counters on every other creature that already has a +1/+1 counter.
Well, I just see this as like a worse Nissa, and I didn't want to play 4 Nissas to start with, so I guess personally I'd be out on this.
Interesting. I see it as being a game-ending bomb.
But doesn't it do basically the same thing as Nissa?
Yes, but you can't use Nissa at instant speed.
Oh, I see.
Tricky.
Are we kind of looking for combat tricks right now? I mean, is that sort of what you're going for, or?
Well, no, I had kind of like felt like we tapped out the 3-drops in terms of their.
Well, I agree
I guess
with
not
that.
not necessarily. For the most part, I felt like we had tapped out 3-drops.
Well, actually, I had one more 3-drop idea. It's a new card from Aether Revolt. It's called Maulfist Revolutionary. It's 1 green for a 3/3 trample. When Maulfist Revolutionary enters the battlefield or dies, for each kind of counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. So it gives you an energy, it gives your planeswalker a loyalty point, and it can happen twice.
Whoa,
when it
does
comes to the battlefield and one dies.
Whining Constrictor give you more energy too?
Yeah.
Holy crap, that card's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Maulfist Revolutionary kind of synergizes nice with all those, and I think that it's a 3-drop, so I'm not suggesting running 4 of them, but I think that it works for the deck.
Well, how much? Oh, you can go, Graham.
I just wanted to make sure that you're clear that it's target permanent or player, so it's not everything that has counters on it. It's just you have to choose one. So basically, you're just getting 1 additional +1/+1. That being said, it's still a 3/3 trample, which on its own is not terrible.
The other question I have for that is, how many Rishkars are we going to play? Because I see that as a 4 of, if it's not out of our price range.
Rishkar?
Yeah.
It's only $4 right now.
Yeah, I mean,
even
it's not
a legendary creature?
Yeah, I mean, you can even just cast it as just for the 2 +1/+1 counters.
Yeah. I think that because it's an enter the battlefield ability and you're not using it for its power and toughness, each of its abilities, it doesn't matter if you're casting it to replace itself.
I mean, you'd rather not be destroying it as you cast it, but
but that's also that's a revolt trigger if you do.
Oh yeah, man, yeah, this card is so good. I just feel like this is
I'm kind of with Dan on this one, Colin. I think that 4 of is the right number for Rishkar.
And I think that maybe we're pushing it on 3-drops if we're also playing Yaheni, and possibly. Well, I mean, do we think that it's possible that Revolution? What's it called?
Maulfist Revolutionary.
Maulfist Revolutionary. Do we think? Let's.
I'm not sold on Maulfist.
I read it wrong, so that's why I'm.
Oh,
thinking,
so you're actually out on it now.
Well, it is a 3 for 3/3 trample, which is kind of what our deck wants.
Right.
But
so my question is that or Catacomb Sifter better?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I would say Man, that's a good question.
See, my thought right now is that we just play 4 Rishkar, a couple Yahennis, a bunch of 2-in-1 drops, and then have some.
Don't forget Drana.
Oh yeah. We're trying out Drana too. Okay.
I feel like 2 Yahenni, 2 Drana, 4 Rishkars.
I think that's
2
plenty.
misses. Yeah, that's a lot of 3 drops.
That's
now.
a lot of 3 drops. So I don't think we can fit any more 3-drop creatures. I think what we're looking for now is removal. And I think
and trample
removal.
trample.
Removal and or combat tricks. I think is what we're looking for.
So I have a combat trick that I think is really a good one. It's a new one in Aether Revolt, and it's 1 and a green. It's called Heroic Intervention. It's an instant that says permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. To me, that is crazy good in an aggro deck because you can swing with the whole team and not worry about losing a single creature. So you can potentially wipe out. They can declare their blockers, thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm going to take out all of their, not quite as big creatures yet," and then all of a sudden, boom, indestructible.
What's it called again?
Heroic Intervention.
Heroic it's a green card.
It's a green card, 1 and a green.
And
so
I can't.
It's an instant. So it's I see it as being both useful for attacking and for protecting your creatures.
Oh man, all these creatures are gonna be sideways every turn though.
Why can't I find it? Oh, there it is. It's a rare.
So
it's a counter. It's a counter spell for any type of removal. So not
any type of destroy effect.
Not Yahenni's expertise, for example,
or anything targeted. So it's hexproof. So Yahenni's, not Yahenni's expertise.
So anything that gives minus X. Well, any so basically it doesn't counter Yahenni's expertise. It counters Fumigate, I believe.
Sure does.
Yes, it does. Because that's a destroy effect.
Yeah. And then it doesn't counter Grasp of Darkness. Yeah, it does because it gives it hexproof. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could see. I think this card is very format dependent. It feels like a sideboard card to me.
So, I mean, the instant in which if we really want to turn every single one of our cards sideways every single turn, this prevents us from losing attackers to blockers.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I like it, and it's also useful in instances where they attempt to use removal on our creatures during their turn or their turn.
Yeah, there's no question this card's powerful. I mean, I'm 100% on board with that. I am curious how much Yahenni's expertise is going to be in the format, though, because it does nothing against that.
Well, hopefully, that's we're talking about one card though, and to your point, we don't know how much yet. But also, this is a +1/+1 counter deck where hopefully the Winding Constrictors are going to be pumping up our creatures pretty quickly. So Yahenni's is only -3/-3 anyway. Hopefully, at some point, that's going to be a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the card's powerful.
Colin, what do you think of this card?
I think it's good. I don't know. I also think Blossoming Defense is good. We should talk about that one. But maybe not. I don't know.
Why would you choose Blossoming Defense over Heroic Intervention when Heroic Intervention hits every single one of your creatures and only costs 1 more?
Because Blossoming Defense also gives power and toughness.
It's also cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, by 1.
That's a number. That is a number.
It certainly is. But in a deck where we are probably going to be playing with not very many cards in our hand because we are going to be casting most of them, I don't see that as too much of an issue.
I'm on the fence. Actually, I think it's good. I think
it's a powerful card. I'm more into it than I am into Blossoming Defense just because of the power level is so much higher. I don't know if I'm into it as a main deck card, but I could be convinced. It's hard for me to know what the format is going to be like at this point. It could be that our deck is just one of many aggro decks, and then though, even if it is, then I think Heroic Intervention is good because you're in combat with the other aggro decks, but you won't necessarily trade. I don't know. This is a tough one. It seems like it could be really good, but I just don't know. So it does seem like the kind of thing we should be testing.
There is precedent for new formats being heavy on aggro decks because people haven't quite figured out how all of the more expensive, intricate cards work together. And so like, okay, we'll throw a bunch of things that smash in and go. So I expect to see more aggro decks at the beginning of the format.
So just quick thoughts. Do we think Yeheni's expertise is going to see a lot of play?
Probably.
I think so. Yeah, I think it'll see a lot of play in black decks. Think Languish. Also, the fact that you get an extra spell out of it for a lot of the format. 3 toughness is not a difficult. Like 3 toughness is 3 and less toughness is pretty like common. So yeah, I think Henny's is going to get plenty.
I don't. If we think that it's going to be one of the premier sweepers, then I don't think we want to play Heroic Intervention.
Well, what else protects against
Henny's expertise?
Henny's then
things that give counters, for example, or things that pump power and toughness. So Blossoming Defense, to Colin's point, I mean that only protects one of your creatures, but.
But one thing you have to also consider is we're not going to be playing against black every single game.
Sure, but I'm saying part of the reason I like Heroic Intervention is with the thought that it counters sweepers. But if we think the main sweeper is going to be Henny's expertise, then I'm less excited about it.
So
we're playing a lot of 2 toughness creatures right now, I think, that, and also a lot of counter creator ones. So I actually don't feel too terrible about being able to get above Henny's expertise pretty fast.
Well, Greenbelt Rampager already is above it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that getting above Henny's is not going to be too terribly difficult. The other thing is, if we run into black decks, instead of leaving Heroic Intervention in the sideboard and putting it in when we need it, you mainboard it and you take it out when you run into black decks that run Henny's expertise, and you replace it with something like Blossoming Defense.
I think we should test it.
Okay.
I mean, I think
we're gonna put it in for science.
It's such a powerful card that I think that it deserves some run, and I'm curious to hear what the outcome. I will say though that this is the kind of card that sort of makes you think fondly about it in testing, because every time you cast it, it's gonna be good. It's just that there's gonna be a lot of games where you're just staring at it going like, I wish this was something else. And you don't remember that. You just remember the times when it was a blowout. So I think we need to, you need to keep that in mind when you're testing cards like this.
Yeah, I still think that its biggest benefit is not as protection against removal as much as an insurance policy that you can swing with every single one of your creatures every single turn.
Right. I mean, if we're sort of swinging into combat and trading or like losing our attackers, that kind of thing, that's like a common thing that's happening. Yeah, I think this card's gonna be pretty good. But then you also have to keep in mind, like, would any combat trick be good in that situation? So it's just a question of I mean, I'm not sure if this deck gives us extra reach, which is something this card gives us extra reach, which is something we might want. I don't know. Like I said, I agree that it's a powerful card and that we should test it. I'm just not sure. It's just hard for me to say what the outcome of it is going to be. It's hard for me. Okay. It's hard for me to judge, which is definitely the kind of card you should be testing.
Right. So what other combat tricks or removal should we be talking about? Colin, you said trample is something we need to talk about and try to get our hands on. I agree. I think trample is exactly what we want.
Well, there's Larger Than Life, which is 1 in a green. Target creature gets +4/+4 and trample until end of turn.
Sorcery.
It's just one creature.
It's a sorcery, right?
And it's a sorcery.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that one either.
Yeah, I mean, I think Blossoming Defense and Heroic Intervention are probably our 2 best options as far as tricks go. Blossoming Defense is really good.
Well, do we want to run Grasp of Darkness?
One card I was thinking.
It's black. It's not like the best. I mean, there's the fight one. There's Prey Upon.
I was thinking. I don't want to play Prey Upon. I was thinking.
Yeah,
of,
me either.
I was thinking of. What about Die Young?
I mean, is it like even legal to play Die Young if you don't also play Live Fast?
Yes, it's legal.
No, I didn't mean in the game. I meant like, is the U.S. government going to come and kick our butts for it?
This is not. You're being very optimistic, thinking this entire segment is going to get into the podcast, Graham. I think this is dead air right now.
Hey,
it is not.
Just in case, you never know.
Die Young's an interesting idea. So Dan,
No. But we were gonna play Fatal Push.
Daniel, Die Young is also a sorcery, right? So Die Young, 1 and a black. Choose target creature. You get 2 energy. Then you may pay any amount of energy. That creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each energy paid this way. So it's the black harnessed lightning that deals in -1/-1 counters instead of damage, and it's sorcery speed.
Oh, are they counters or is it just until end of turn?
It gets -1/-1 until end of turn.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's not counters.
Yeah.
So are we going to play Fatal Push since we've got all these Revolt triggers? I feel
I
like
think
that's the obvious.
That was already in the deck, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
we have
so-
4 of those for sure.
Okay. So we're talking in addition to. Okay, well that makes me actually feel a little bit better about something like Die Young.
Oh, right. That we already have 4 of the best removal spell in the format. Yes.
Right. Yes.
So thoughts about removal spells. If Heart of Kirin is going to see a lot of play, we want cards that kill Heart of Kirin.
Right, and Die Young does not do
Die
that.
Young does not do that. Grasp of Darkness does. So I think that's definitely a mark and I think if we are playing Unbridled Growth, which I believe we are,
Yep.
then
So far.
the casting cost of Grasp of Darkness is less prohibitive.
That's what I said.
You already said that?
Okay.
Yeah,
When did you say that?
I said that.
Oh wait, a long time
No,
ago.
I said that right when I just mentioned Grasp of Darkness, and Graham said it's black, and I said, but we're playing the enchantment that fixes our mana.
Colin.
So it's fine.
Yeah, but
Colin, you're
you
so
also
smart.
You also said like
Thank you.
40
you.
minutes ago when you first brought up.
Black, yeah.
Oh, you know,
Because I
he
was
said
talking about-
he said that for Gifted Etherborn.
Or gifted Etherborn, yeah. But it was the same. It
Same
was the
argument.
exact same argument. Yeah.
But yeah, I like Grasp of Darkness. And Colin, you're right in your
Yes, sir.
assessment that Unbridled Growth makes it easier to cast the double black cost of Grasp of Darkness.
Ooh.
That's what I thought.
Hey.
Thank
you. Here's an interesting card. This is not removal or anything. This is just a potential synergistic card. It's a Revolt trigger. It's +1/+1 activator, and it's card draw. Implement of Ferocity. It's a 1 casting cost artifact that you pay 1 green, sack it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then when it is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Is that worth it? I mean, it does the Revolt trigger thing, so that's important. You get a +1/+1 counter, and you get a card back.
What's the black one?
But it does.
What's the black one do?
I think
the
it
black one
drains for 1.
Malice. Target player discards a card,
Oh, discards a card.
and it costs 2. Black one is not good.
Wait a second. Cost 2.
So
Oh,
it
cost
costs
2
2 to
cost
cast.
2 to cast.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have to discard, and you get to draw. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
it's-
with the green one, we get a counter and we get a draw.
right, and then it also combos with.
It triggers Revolt.
Seems a little. Oh, only activate this as a sorcery.
Yeah, that's the other bummer.
Huh.
I kind of like it just because of the card element. Also, +1/+1 counters are great.
It seems.
It seems like one of those things we could play early if need be. Like say we've only got 2 drops in our hand and it's turn 3 and we just put it out and play, and then we don't use its ability until later in the game when we either need a Revolt trigger or we have nothing left to cast, so we just need to put a +1/+1 counter on something.
I think it's too subtle.
Draw a card.
I think it's too subtle. I'd rather play Renegade Map or Terrarian or something, because they allow you to do the Revolt on turn 2 plan, whereas this one doesn't.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know about Terrarian, though. Yeah.
What's your
Well, actually, Daniel, just read Terrarian for us real quick.
So Terrarian's a 1-mana artifact. It comes into play tapped, and then you can tap it and sacrifice it. We got
And pay 2 to
pay 2,
to
but then you get 2 mana of any color and draw a card. So it's free basically it filters your mana a little bit, and
Yeah, and it fixes your mana. So say you only have forests and you need 2 swamps, you can do that. Terrarian makes them what you need them to be, and you get a draw card. Okay.
So my thought is that either that or Renegade Map is better than Implement of Ferocity.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Okay. That's fine. They do different things, which is I would say that Terrarian is better than Renegade Map just because it replaces itself with a card draw, and it fixes the mana. It fixes mana once.
Well,
which
Renegade
is not...
replaces itself too.
Oh, with a land.
Yeah.
Fair. That's true. I still think I like Terrarian better than I like Renegade Map.
I'm not sure. I've never. I mean, Renegade Map looks like a perfectly playable card to me.
Okay, well, here's a question. We don't want more than 2 of these in the deck, right?
Map or Terrarian.
Right.
Just run one of each.
Let's just run one of each and see which one we end up liking better when we test it.
You know, my honest thought is that Renegade Map is better. Like, that's my initial thought on the card.
Because it gives you mana forever instead of just one-time use.
Well, not just that, but I mean, it fixes, right? So let's say you were like, crap, I only have green or I only have black. You play Renegade Map and you're like, I get the other one. So we know we need both of those colors in our deck. Yeah, and it's permanent as opposed to Terrarian, which is a one-shot. So.
Okay, well, then that sold me. Let's go with Renegade Map. But how many does this list want?
I think 2 is.
What are our numbers outright?
I don't know. I don't know, but I think probably 2-ish, 1 or 2, something like that. Just to have another little revolt enabler.
Because I feel like our mana base can be pretty low in this deck, considering we're not running any 4-drops.
Plus, we can run Aether Hubs, and we can run the green-black multi-land from Kaladesh, which is really good. We can also run Evolving Wilds.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Evolving Wilds we want, because there's a lot of 1-drops in this deck, but I think it's pretty good. We might want 4. I mean, we have no other tap lands. Because if we play Aether Hub and
Blooming Marsh.
Yeah, Blooming Marsh.
So
yeah,
Blooming Marsh, that one comes in tapped if it's your third or if it's your 4th land or later. So
my
yeah, but at that point we can survive that in this deck. That's actually great.
So my thought is 4 Aether Hubs, 4 Blooming Marsh, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 Evolving Wilds, and then the rest, 1 swamp and then the rest forests.
I don't think 1 swamp. I think that
we are really green. We are really green.
Are we?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll have we have Unbridled Growth.
Yeah.
And we have Renegade Map. And we do
have fetches.
We have 3 fetches and 8 multi-lands. So we have 11, 12, 13, 17 sources of black mana without with only playing 1 swamp.
Okay.
Assuming we played 2 Renegade Map. So, and I figure we're not going to go nuts on the Grasp of Darkness, probably just 1 or 2.
I was thinking 2, yeah.
Are you sure we're really green? Because I've got 30 symbols of green and 20 symbols of black in tapped out right now.
Oh yeah, there's Drana too. But
Drana.
I honestly think we're going to be fine. We have Unbridled Growth, we have a lot of multi-lands. I think it's going to be good. It's just that we need the green earlier.
Yeah, no, I totally get your point. The only thing I'd like to argue for right now is 2 swamps.
Oh, well that's a minor point. Yeah, if that's all you wanted.
Yeah, I just want 2 swamps in case we need to fetch more than 1 for some reason.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, 2 swamps it is.
I knew that was going to be a hard sell.
I didn't realize you were
We were so close to agreeing already. Okay, so when we're talking about numbers, let's talk about the creatures that we for sure really want early, right? That will determine the 4-ofs in the deck, right? So Green Wheel Liberator is a revolt trigger one, so we probably don't need that one right away because we want to make sure we don't want that one necessarily first turn, because if we don't have a revolt trigger by turn 2, it gets worse. Right.
So we can probably shave that a little bit.
Right, but in contrast, Green Belt Rampager, which is the 3/4 elephant, we do want that on turn 1 to get our energy right away. And
Right.
to get
Well,
a
we
revolt
also
trigger.
want 4 of those because it's the best card ever made.
Also,
And
because
also-
of that.
And also on turn 2, it is a revolt trigger, which we can pair with the Narnum Renegade, which we definitely want.
Yeah, we
Four of.
want a 4
Yeah.
of in that one.
Because even if we don't have a revolt trigger on turn 1, that's still it's still 1 for 1/2 death touch, which is never a bad thing.
Correct.
And we probably want 4 unbridled growth, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
That's
Yeah.
one of our best revolt triggers, I think. And then we're gonna go with just to recap the 1-drops. Then we also want 2 renegade maps. Is that what we decided?
I think we decided with 2. Yeah.
Yes,
Or
2.
decided on 2.
Okay. So I think that's the one sort of the 1-drop permanence taken care of. And then we want 4 winding constrictors, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So we have way too many cards. So we have
Yeah,
way
we're
too many
gonna-
cards, by the way.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. No way, us. That never happens.
Okay. 4 winding constrictors, 4 fatal push. Okay. So
I think
what are we at now?
I think, I think Dan, and I'm sorry, but I think the Catacomb Sifter is not going to make the final cut.
For sure. Let's cut Catacomb Sifter. It doesn't seem anywhere near good enough. Like we have such a high card quality that we can't play a card like that.
I think we should probably drop the Glint Sleeve Siphoner to a 2 of. I think it's a good card, and I think that it may end up overperforming, and if it does, then we'll add more in, but at the moment, I can't see it. I would say let's drop that to 2.
Okay, that puts us at 68.
Okay. So maybe cut. So how many Rishkars do we want to play? Do we want 4?
We said 4 originally, but I don't know if we really do.
We're talking about 4 Rishkar currently, and then also 1. What's the planeswalker? The green planeswalker.
Nissa Voice of Zendikar.
Okay, so these are all kind of similar, right? They're like counter adding. So, question: do we want to cut one of these, or do we want to play like 5? Do we want to definitely keep all of those?
I think 2 Nissas is correct, so maybe 3 Rishkars.
I like.
Yeah, maybe
see,
3
I like Rishkar better than Nissa. Like, I think it's.
I don't, just because Nissa gives +1/+1 counters to everything.
Okay, but imagine a blank board, and then
I imagine a blank board. I play a Rishkar. I get no benefit from it. Whereas
you get
I play Nissa, I get a creature.
You get a 3/3 creature when you play a Rishkar.
Yeah,
that's a benefit. You get a 3/3 creature that can tap for green.
Okay,
that's true.
So
all right, 1 Nissa, 4 Rishkars.
And then can we cut Yahenni?
Totally cut Yahenni? Or just down to 1?
No, I don't want to totally cut him because he's also a revolt enabler. How about the Scrounging Bandar?
What's Scrounging?
That's the one where you move the counters.
He's the 0/0 comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on him.
But that's a 2-drop. We need more 2-drops. I feel like we should be cutting 3-drops.
Oh, okay. That's probably a good point.
So, how do we feel? So, let's take stock. We have a Drana. How many Dranas are we playing?
1 so far.
1 Drana, and we're playing how many Yahennis?
1 Yahenni.
1 Yahenni.
1 Yahenni, 1 Drana, 4 Rishkar.
So we've got 7 3-drops if we leave it as is, which is a pretty good number, I think.
Okay, so are we leaving the 3-drop alone then? Like we're definitely.
I would say so because we have 22 drops still.
Okay.
And we've got 18 1-drops.
So you want to cut a Scrounging Bandar?
I would like to cut a Scrounging Bandar. I think it is the weakest of all of the 2-drops that we have, and I don't even think it's close.
I don't know. It's a revolt trigger. Yeah.
Yeah, but we have to cut something.
Okay.
So how many? How many revolt triggers?
I'm open to suggestions.
So we have 4 Greenbelt Rampagers, 4 Unbridled Growth, 2 Renegade Maps. So we have 10 revolt trigger. Oh, we also have the Evolving Wilds. So we have 13 revolt triggers right now.
And Yahenni's also one as well.
And what?
Yahenni.
Oh yeah, Yahenni is a revolt trigger as well. Okay, so we have 14 revolt triggers, and we have, let's see, Narnum Renegade. So Fatal Push doesn't necessarily need a revolt trigger. I think we need more revolt cards. I think that we want Greenwheel Liberators. and I think that we already have the Narnum Renegades, but I think we want to go the full 4 on the Green Wheel Liberators.
Oh, really?
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking
Okay.
right now.
Do you want to do that at the expense of the Scrounging Bandar?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think it's just like a better scrounging bandar, basically.
Okay. So we're still 6 cards over. Do we need 4 unbridled growths, or can we get away with 3?
Okay, let's go down to 3.
I'm asking you.
Well, I mean, I don't. So basically, I'm looking at sort of the ways to go over the top, and I feel like maybe we have too many at the moment. And I just feel like when you're making an aggro deck, then like.
So if we're gonna to that point, we should probably cut a couple Rishkars then. If you want to cut 3 drops, well, let's just cut 1 or 2 Rishkars.
Is Rishkar worse or better than Drana?
It's hard to say. We have to play with him. I think that Drana has the potential to be freaking great, and I think Rishkar has the potential to be freaking great. It's hard to say. We're testing.
Okay. Sure, let's cut a couple Rishkars. Just so we can have some of each, I guess.
Just like the Bandar, I especially paired with the Winding Constrictor, that one could end up, the Scrounging Bandar could end up being freaking awesome. But we have to cut something.
Thoughts on cutting a Winding Constrictor?
I think that's kind of core to what we're trying to do with the deck, so I would not cut that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. So we're cutting an Unbridled Growth, and we're cutting 2 Rishkars?
Right, and we can cut 1 Grasp of Darkness and go down to 5 direct removal cards.
I am so sure Rishkar is better than Drana. That's like my biggest problem with the current way things are going. Like it just seems so clearly better than Drana. It's like
I don't see how it's clear. Rishkar only gives +1/+1 counters when it enters. Drana could potentially be giving every single creature you control +1/+1 counter every single turn.
But they only need 1 flying creature to block Drana, and they're not going to have any other creatures to
or
block.
alternatively, they can just destroy it. Like Rishkar doesn't even care. Like it's already done its dirty business when it comes into play, so they can destroy it. Like what if you played a 1-drop, a Winding Constrictor, and then Rishkar? You're just like, that is such a huge board presence, like on turn 3. And Drana just isn't that level of speed.
Dan.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'll let you finish.
I just want 1. I just want to see if it works.
Okay. All right.
That's all I'm asking for. Single Drana.
We're getting closer.
Good
We're
enough.
down to 63. We're
right.
down to 63.
Okay. Can we go down to 1 Grasp of Darkness?
Actually, now that we've cut so many 3 drops, good news. Our average CMC has dropped to 1.5, so we can actually cut a land. So I will cut an...
Wait. How many lands do we have?
21 right now, which was correct when our CMC average was 1.9, but now that we're down to, or when it was 1.8 or whatever, but now we're down to 1.5. We can go to 20 lands, so that's good.
I move we cut an Evolving Wilds.
Okay, 1 Evolving Wilds, and yeah.
Over a 4. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or a Swamp.
I almost wonder if we cut a Blooming Marsh, because the Evolving Wilds is the Revolt trigger.
But you want a high probability of drawing a Blooming Marsh in your opening hand because it is a fast land. So that means that's why you put 4 in the deck, is because you need them early.
Okay. Yep. I'll buy that. Yeah, I guess we can cut a Swamp.
So I would almost cut an Aether Hub, actually.
Oh. Well, that's not a bad idea either.
Oh boy, I really like Aether Hubs in this deck.
Well, we'll have 3 of them.
Yeah, and we don't need as much mana fixing with them because we've only got 2 colors.
Okay.
I'm going to go to 3 Aether Hubs. As deck master for the day, I've made my decision.
So did you cut the second Grasp?
I did.
Okay. So what are we down to now?
We are at 62.
We can just run a 62 card. No.
We cannot run a 62 card deck.
Discipline. We must have discipline.
Listeners, do not run 62 card decks. This is the hardest part of brewing, is making those last couple cuts, and do not do it. Always run 60 cards. Maybe on the future fundamentals, I can talk about why that is absolutely important.
Okay, so I have to suggest something that I kind of hate, but I actually have a good reason for it. We should cut 2 Long Tusk Cubs.
But they combo with Winding Constrictor.
Yes, they do, but
And Greenbelt
And
Rampager.
Greenbelt Rampager.
the problem is I am worried that there's not going to be enough energy to get them super
Greenbelt
huge.
Rampager is an endless source of energy. Endless. It never stops. It's forever.
Oh, is that what endless means?
Especially if your creatures, especially if you have a Rishkar down and you've got +1/+1 counters.
Hey, I just told you I hate this suggestion.
Don't do it then. Jeez.
Look,
let's cut some frickin' Greenbelt Liberators.
Greenbelt Rampage.
Greenbelt Liberators. Just got some Liberators. Who cares? They're not that great.
Didn't you just push to go all in on the Liberator like 5 minutes ago?
No, but I didn't know we were gonna have to cut Long Tusk Cub. That card's way better than Greenbelt Liberator.
Oh, well, screw it. Get rid of the Liberators then.
Yeah.
The only reason that I didn't suggest that was because you were like, no, we need to go all in on the Revolt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not at the expense of sanity.
Oh,
Long Tusk Cub is ridiculous.
You won't hear any arguments from me on that.
Well,
all right,
you shouldn't have dared mention cutting it then. Jeez. You were on such a roll, Graham. Damn. All right.
I tried to tell you I hated it.
All right. So we're cutting 2 Greenbelt Liberators and we're done. I think.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
I think, man, this was a hard.
We got down to
This was probably our longest build
we got
ever.
down to the nitty gritty.
That was like an hour build.
Sweet. So hopefully our listeners have been inspired to try out their own brews while we go through all of these nitty gritty, because I think that's very important.
I've really just
Actually,
I've
I think
been inspired to argue with my parents. That's been nice.
Oh,
I
really?
think it's
Okay.
I
Well,
think
how's
it's
that
worth-
different from any other Monday, Dan?
Oh, I know. You know me so well.
Okay, so great.
And
Once
Joe's
again,
gone.
we're out of time, so we are not able to talk about sideboards. But please, obviously, take a look at your local metagame or what you can guess from it based on what you see coming in the set, and sideboard accordingly. Some of the good cards that you might want to sideboard are perhaps some of our late cuts, because this deck is untuned. And as we go and tune things, most of these cards are fairly low cost. So having a couple extras that you can sort of fill out your curve if you feel like it needs to be a little different, I would definitely do it, particularly with the removal cards, the Grasp of Darkness, the Die Youngs, and maybe a couple more heroic interventions into your sideboard wouldn't be a terrible idea. So, yeah, the biggest questions for me are, is heroic intervention as good as we think it's going to be? Can Drana, Liberator of Malakir, get through? Is Renegade map even worth having on the list, or should we just put those green wheel Liberators back in? Those are the questions that I want answered, but all in all, I think that we should be able to smash pretty hard with this deck. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking the time to haggle it out. And yeah, thanks, listeners, for following along too. Hopefully it inspired you to make a great deck.
Okay, that's our show for today. Thanks for joining us.
And please don't forget to tell all your friends and get excited about brewing decks for Magic.
Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and you can even friend us on tappedout.net, where we post all of our deck lists from these live brews.
That's right, and don't forget that we also post a list of all the cards we even talk about, regardless of their format or the game or whatever, in the maybeboard, so you can follow along on Tapped Out. And definitely let us know what you think in the comments, especially if it's a good thing.
And especially if I messed up and missed a card that we talked about that should be in the maybeboard, let me know so I can fix it. And you can let me know by hitting us up on Twitter at Zirconia, or you can email us at moxzirconia@gmail.com, or you can just reply to the deck and maybe upvote the deck on tappedout.net, where we have all those. And you can find us as Mox Team Zirconia on tappedout.net.
We also want to know if the deck inspired you to get started on a new deck idea, because we're all about inspiration.
Yep, and that's it, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you guys back here next week.
Bye now.
Bye!